Hello and welcome to the Root Division Podcast. I am your host, Tony Frisella, along with my co-host, Jessica Ryder. This episode is one that you will not forget and you will get a lot of value out of. This conversation is with Brian Sneed, the COO and president of Raceline and Associates here in St. Louis, Missouri. This is a company that in 1990 was founded and went from zero to projected this year, 2021, of crushing $500 million. They started in St. Louis and are now a global company. You're going to hear perspectives about empowering people, where entrepreneurship meets compassion. You're going to hear about pivotal moments that Brian had with his father in high school concerning a comment that his father made with the grades that he was getting at the time. You're going to talk. This is a company that thinks ahead, the talent development program that they have in place for the people, because guys, a company that has grown that rapidly is one that's very easy to get off track if people are not aligned with the same vision, mission, values. So you're going to hear about their ethos. You're going to hear about their Raceline First initiative. And so without further ado, let's get in this conversation. And please, I'm telling you, listen to this thing all the way through. You're going to get a lot out of it.
Oh, we are doing this right now.
This is it.
Yeah. We're doing the podcast.
I record them all in advance, and then Jessica and I work in the background, and then I put an intro and I put an outro to it.
Oh, okay.
And, yeah.
Hey,
so
bring it on. Okay.
I've got this recorded, and we're going to take the audio. We're going to put it on go.
Okay. All right. Very good. Okay. So yeah, my background, I grew up in St. Louis, went to CBC High School, graduated, then went to Missouri State. Well, what is now Missouri State? It was Southwest Missouri State back in the day when I was there. And then I started out of college and worked for Reuben Brown, which is now the largest public accounting firm in St. Louis. So I did that for 4 years. And then went over to start working with Raceline and Associates. And it's Rudy Raceline is the founder, and he's also my father-in-law. So wife and I met when we were quite young, 15. So I've known Rudy since he started the company 30 years ago. We kind of, our relationship, my wife and I, and Rudy's business kind of took off at the same exact time. So anyway, so at the time I joined, which was back in 2000, we were about 40 employees and doing about 25 million a year. So every year for 21 years I've been there has been a new growth experience. So we this past year we did 370 million in sales, and this coming year we're gonna crush 500 million in sales.
Wow!
So we've been on quite a journey, and it's been, to say the least, it's been a lot of fun.
That's
my
amazing.
role. Yeah. So my role started out in more of the finance and accounting side. And then, but as you can imagine, a growing company with 40 people, you tend to wear a lot of different hats along the way. And actually, we had a near-death experience about 18 months after I started with the company, and we had to cut from 40 down to about 22 people, so almost in half, just to stay alive. So coming out of that, I was had the opportunity to do just about everything in the company except for engineering, but project management, construction management, business development, estimating, you name it. We did whatever it took to get the job done.
I mean, with a small family business, what I would call it a family business with Rudy there, and your father-in-law, I can relate to that. I can understand. Sure. You got to do what you got to do.
Absolutely. Yeah. So I went through that, and then I worked through, became a partner in the company. One of the things that Rudy was really kind of forward thinking on was how he was going to not just grow the business, but also transition the business. So when he was still fairly young, probably just in his early 50s, he started selling shares to myself and 5 of my other partners. And now the 7 of us make up the board of directors. And then We also have part of the company is an ESOP, and I can talk about that as we get into some of your other questions. I think, some of that stuff ties together pretty nicely with the entrepreneurship piece that you're wanting to talk about. So I was CFO for about 8 years, and then back in 2018, I took over as president and chief operating officer, and that's where my role is today.
That's awesome. And I looked back at the company from 1990 to 2020, 30 years, going from a brand new company to now you guys are talking about this year potentially over 500 million. That's mind blowing. Like I can only imagine, because I know the growth that our organization had was nothing even close to that, but all the things that have to happen in order to experience that kind of growth is amazing. And on our last podcast, we talked about communication, especially with family involved. I guess, can you give any examples on, where maybe there might have been some communication breakdowns, how you guys have maybe worked through how to communicate differently in order, because again, as you had more and more moving pieces, you had to have more effective communication.
Yeah, I mean, I think it definitely is something that it's a learning curve, because, I tell people we usually have monthly, like a new employee luncheon where myself and Rudy will sit in and just kind of try to give some of the background of the company to the new employees. And I tell them, we used to have one office, and you could just on a Monday morning walk to get coffee, and you could almost see everybody and catch up with them. And we were all, pretty much working on one or two major projects at the same time. So we interacted with each other constantly. And so, we created a culture that, my partners and even my father-in-law, I mean, I consider them my best friends. I mean, we're really, really tight. We've been through good and bad and everything else together. But today, now we're spread out over 10 locations, different countries, even different languages. We've got an operation in Shanghai. We have some in Poland, in Brazil. So then how do you kind of keep that same family culture and those values of how you do business? How do you continue to operate the company and even just spread that communication as you talked about? So when I came into the role I'm in now, I really just tried to boil it down to a few things. And I think just repeating that message as constantly as you can, because sometimes you feel like you're repeating yourself. But it's amazing how important it is to just keep the message and keep it aligned with, what your values are and what that culture is. For us, we've coined, remain humble, stay hungry, and be happy. And we call that our ethos. And, you could do a whole podcast just on what those three things mean to a business, right? But so, that's what we try to do. And then the other thing that I brought to the company just a couple of years ago is, as we were expanding into these different locations and just expanding so rapidly, we created the one race line mantra, and it's got several different kind of spokes to that hub, but it's just talking about, no matter which division you're in or what department you work in or what your job description is, we're all trying to accomplish the same thing. We're all trying to act in the same way, treat, whether it's each other or employees or our customers, we all have a mutual respect. And, if somebody needs our help, we never say, well, that's not our job, or, well, that's, we don't finger point. And as we were growing and going through some of those growing pains, that's how I came up with that, is that, I'd be talking to one person and they would be pointing to one of our other divisions or other departments. And I would say, ultimately, if that's not something I can explain to the customer as a reason, then it's not a reason, right? It's something that we have to work through it together. And if I can't tell the customer a legitimate reason why we were late or the poor quality, then, just blaming a different part of the organization won't cut it. So I would say that remain humble, stay hungry, be happy, and have a kind of a one company mentality.
We could end this right here. And
I'm mic drop.
We're done now.
I mean, everything you just said is honestly is a mic drop, because the key, I think, is everybody you hear now is just consistency across anything that you do. And you are consistently giving that message over and over again. It's the same message that you're giving. People know what to expect when they come to work there. There's a culture. You're just creating an infrastructure of people that want to come and work. And then you have the same one mantra. How does that, it's huge, right? And
yeah,
so
I think it does start to, get some traction and a life of its own. We start to talk about one race line moments. If I go to a job site, and we've got multiple projects here domestically, we've been very fortunate during COVID. Traditionally about 80% of our business was overseas. And here recently in the last 2 years, it's shifted kind of into North America, which is a blessing due to COVID. But, I'll go to a job site and I'll see people from 3 or 4 of our different locations interacting. Even the COVID, I think the silver lining for us is almost exactly what we're doing right now. Just this communication, this whole forum, whether it's Zoom or, a lot of people are getting fatigued with it, but at the end of the day, it has really brought people together. Instead of maybe shooting an email, now it's very easy to just pop on Teams and have a little bit of face-to-face interaction across different locations. So I do think that it's something that, a lot of people talk about their mission statement, their values, and, they're more than things on the wall. I think those are all, kind of cliche. We obviously all mean that, right? If it's your values, then you have to live the values. So I take a lot of pride in when I do hear people talk about one race line, and I know the employees know that I'm fully bought into it. So I'll get some feedback from people telling me how they've maybe collaborated across different locations, and it's pretty rewarding.
So, but that, with everything that you just went over with the one race line, your ethos. So I have a unique perspective to race line, because I know one of your key players very well, a family friend, one of my dad's best friends. And when he talks about race line, like it's like a little kid, just about all how forward thinking things are there, and how unique the culture is there, and how how tight everybody is there. And sometimes for people that don't know the company, and again, on the other side of that is I know you've known you for a few years, it would be kind of like, okay, well, you really like your job, but no, it's more than a job. It's a career. It's a lifestyle. It's something that people actually your company is actually something that is interwoven into their whole life, because there's so much of it there. It's amazing. I think the testament to what you guys have done there, what you guys have built there. And so one of the things I looked at some of the history of your guys's news articles on your website. What's really interesting is you look at the headlines, it's contribute, acquisition, promotion, contribute, new plant opening. It's just nonstop. And this was just until like the last half of last year. And it was amazing what you guys have been doing there. So people obviously are a large part of of everything. I mean, they are everything in an organization. So I guess how are you guys empowering your people? Or do you guys paint a vision for them? That's the better way, more tied into the podcast. Do you guys paint a vision for them and how they can create their own career, or follow a certain career path in your organization?
Yeah, so I think we do have a formal talent development program, and there's 3 pillars to the talent development program. It's recruiting, it's training, and then career development. So ultimately, it all starts kind of in the beginning. We've got an internship program that's grown. I think in the past couple of years, we've had close to 20 interns across all of our different locations. It's something our management group puts a tremendous amount of time into. I mean, I know back when I did an internship, half the time you sat idly, right? Because it was, nobody had time to sit down and explain something to somebody that didn't really know what they were doing. But today, I mean, we do everything from, a capstone project to community service to, shadowing and getting kind of a cross-functional experience across the company. So we've really formalized it. So, in terms of looking at the growth of a company the way we have, your major limitation is the people. I mean, if you can't recruit and retain the best people, you will never grow a company successfully. The word empowerment is, it's a way to also talk about the first step of empowerment is even just learning to let go. And I learned a long time ago that a lot of the people that come up behind you, they're not going to do it the same way you did it. But at the point at which you start to realize that they're doing it even better, that's when you really buy into empowerment. I'll say, hey, this is kind of the message I'm looking for in a business development piece that I'm looking to do, or a marketing piece, and it comes back from our group, and it's something way better than I would have come up with myself. And so I think that is a key part of it, Tony. I think you have to really believe in what other people can achieve. And you can't necessarily, you'll never grow a company if you're micromanaging. That's why a lot of companies stay the way they are. So I would say that talent development, so recruiting, training, and career development are the three main pillars of our talent development program. And then the other way that we're empowering people is through our employee stock ownership program. So, Rudy, the way I explain Rudy is, entrepreneurship meets compassion. And it's a very rare thing, but we're blessed with it. I mean, we could have, you don't have to be a financial genius to realize that if you grow a company from 25 million to 500, there's plenty of opportunities along the way to take your chips off the table and just call it a day and go fishing. And Rudy, along with the rest of my partners, our board have just decided that, if we can empower and through the power of ownership, all of our employees that have helped us build this company, will instill an ownership mentality across the entire organization. And, I think that's a huge key to our success. We started it in 2014. And if you track our success since then, I don't think that it's I don't think it's just a coincidence. I think it truly is the power of an ownership mentality.
Everything you're saying is things that I think a lot of people know, but they have a hard time to figure out how taking that first step to let go. And I think it's when a lot of people fall on hard times, and it kind of leads me to my next question. But when people fall on hard times, when they really are just kind of struck at the heart or the gut or the mind to figure out something's got to change. I got to have a radical, different way of thinking in some cases. And in some cases, I just got to let go and let the chips fall where they may, and trust these people to do, because certain people can't handle certain situations very well or certain positions very well. But I everything you're saying is personally, and what we're doing within our own organization, a lot of the things you're saying are things that we're trying and working ourselves to implement, because I am the number one believer people are everything. You mentioned when you first came on that you guys had a big reduction. Just out of curiosity, was that because that was like around the .com bust time of the company, or was it just something other related? I'm just curious.
Yeah, no, it's the primary business that we serve is designing and building aluminum can manufacturing plants. Mm-hmm. So if you drink it out of an aluminum can, it's a good chance that our company designed and built the manufacturing facility that made that, right? Mm-hmm. So it back in the day when we were at 25 million, it's project business, just part of your business, a good part of your business, the same way, right? You spend all the time designing the landscape, and then you go out and you install it, and next thing you know, you got to turn around and find the next project, or to just keep that thing going. so we hit a period of time back then where we were really reliant on one major customer and one major industry. And they went on a diet. They went on about a 24-month diet. And we went almost 18 months without taking on really any new work. And, no company is built to do that. So
Yeah.
Rudy and his original partner, Fritz, they both went a year with no pay. Myself and my other 6 partners, they took a 30% pay cut. And then we had to trim back, about 20 of the people. That was back in 2000, 2001.
That's man.
I'm sorry. I'm fascinated by Rudy at this point, because for someone to start a company like this in 1990 and have that forward thinking, have that compassion, you just didn't see that in that era. I didn't see that in my era, although I was a young child, but still, you didn't see that. So you coming up in the company, I imagine he's a huge mentor for you. But how did the impact within the company, I don't know, my question is more like, what outside forces also kind of influenced you to bring in new things to the company as well, to help get it from 25 to 500? I'm just going to say you're already there.
I think it kind of ties back into when Tony kind of gave me the background of what you guys were wanting to talk about. One of the notes that I jotted down to myself was just, thinking about leadership. And leadership is an evolution. It's something. And I'm gonna tie this into answering your question. Okay.
Yeah, that's fine.
It's really something where if you've played sports growing up, or your schoolwork, everything that you do through the earliest part of your development, your childhood, high school, college, your career, it's all individual driven. I mean, yeah, you might play on a team, you work for a company, but at the end of the day, you're always working to get recognized. It's your grades, it's your performance, it's your resume. And leadership is 180 degrees from that. Leadership is about, do I find the same level of enjoyment and fulfillment out of seeing other people around me succeed? Do I get that same, do I have that same drive? And the best leaders, you develop that. It's just what you have to do. You have to not sit back and one of the analogies that we always used within our board and our partnership is we said, we want to be like a football team where the guy that carries the football into the end zone isn't the one spiking it, because there's so many things that go on with that 11 or 12 person team that some people don't even fully appreciate, but it took that entire team to make that happen. Right. So I think, as far as what Rudy's evolution, and yes, he's of course my biggest mentor. And I've actually been able to see him evolve, from a young executive to, from the time he was in his mid 40s is about when I started, about 50 is when I started working for him. And, now he's 72. And the person he was then versus now, I think his character is identical, but there's a lot of other things that have evolved tremendously. And he's really kind of developed into that leader that you want to follow. And he's laid the groundwork and set the example. And, one of the things he tells me all the time is that every time in his life, when he's ever been asked to give, whether that's financially or whether that's, even sometimes customers ask you to sacrifice. And he said, every time I've been asked to do that, I feel like I've done it and I've been paid back fivefold. So, I think that those are just lessons that I grew up learning in business. And, I think there's a lot that we don't control, that we've had some great fortune, but I also do think that, putting others first is a really key ingredient.
fact that you were able to, you started at the company in hard times, I can definitely relate to. Again, different scale of businesses, but I came in the business in 2009. That was the one of the, COVID, we're so blessed, like ramped our business up.
Right.
But in 2008, that scenario almost took us out. Took us out. And so I feel like I have a whole different appreciation for the business, since it's a family-owned business, multi-generational. And then you kind of had the same experience. You watched, you came in, you guys were rocking, and all of a sudden, it's like the faucet got cut off. That's how I explained to my sales team, like, guys, you don't know what it's like for the phones not to ring and not to have work to be working on, and the trucks to be coming back, because they're, husband lost a job, wife said, we got to cancel the job, we can't do it, but that also, I feel like it probably gave you a different perspective, a different hunger, where it says, like, look, it's not always this good. Just because we are at this level doesn't mean tomorrow, things couldn't be shut off. This year, for a lot of people, that happened. It can always happen. You got to be grateful. You got to diversify. You got to expand in order to be able to offset where one might fail. We have these other things still going, so we can keep the people working, employed, and moving forward.
Yeah, I mean, I think you defined the DNA of our stay hungry in our ethos. I mean, you go through that. I mean, I can remember I just started my wife. So my first daughter was born in 99. So I started in October of 99. She was born in July. So then fast forward and you're into 2000, 2001. I had just left public accounting. I had a great job. I enjoyed my job, but I always hoped to be part of running a business. And obviously the opportunity was presented. And 18 months later, my wife was pregnant with my son, who ended up being born in December of 2001. And in between those two things, you've got 9/11. So, I mean, I remember I went to lunch with Rudy one day, and I just told him, I said, hey, the last thing I ever wanted to do was come to the company and be a burden of all these people. I can pivot pretty quickly. I can go back to what I was doing. And, it's one of the things I always loved about the CPA background is it's like, having a profession. You can always fall back on it, let's say. And I can just remember him looking at me and saying, look, man, I'm gonna keep going until I lose everything. And he said, I came here with nothing, and I'm willing to take it all the way. And he said, I don't want you to leave, and but it's your decision. And I said, well, man, I can get behind that. So the stay hungry part is, never take what you have for granted. I mean, we keep going because we have that fear of going backwards. I mean, I tell people all the time, they say, well, when's enough going to be enough? And I said, I tell them two things. I said, number one, and you'll love this one, Tony, is, a tree that stops growing is starting to die. That's the main thing I think of. And the second thing I tell people is, if you want the same opportunity that I've been given, got to grow the company, right? I mean, in a period of growth, that gives everybody an opportunity. If you're just staying the same, it really limits people's career opportunities.
100%. So I want to bring it back to one of the questions I kind of prefaced with last week. When you were you were dating, or you met your wife when you were 15, so pretty young, and but when you're 18, 19, 20, like, where did you think you would be today? When you thought out, or if you maybe you didn't think out, I know I never did, but where do you think you were going to be at this point in your life?
Man, when I was that age, there was something happened about the time that I was a junior in high school. I think up until that point, I was I was more interested in soccer and cars and girls than I was in school. And I can remember my second semester sophomore year at CBC, I got not great grades. It was, and typically the 3.0 was like the Mendoza line with my dad. It was like, if you stayed at 3.0 or above, you kept your car and all that stuff. And I dipped, and it was like a 2.3 or something, something. And I can remember him just looking at me and saying, and me thinking, Jesus, I don't know what's going to happen. I never really wanted to find out what was going to happen, and I was just sitting there, and he just looked at me and he told me, he said, you know what? He said, if you're happy and satisfied with this and you think this is going to get you to where you want to go, then, at some point, these grades aren't for me. They're your grades. And I just remember that being a turning point in my whole mentality about what did I want to do and where did I want to go. And from that point forward, I think the rest of high school and all of college, I think I got 2 Bs. I mean, I was committed to studying. I was committed to getting on track with a career. And, when I was 18 or 19, I never dreamed that I would have the success that I've had. But certainly I had the motivation, and I definitely knew that I loved the business. I don't know why I knew that, but I just, it was something that always excited me.
The conversation, or what your dad told you, is not something you hear a lot of parents tell their kids.
Nope.
And that uniqueness, that it is so, I mean, myself as a parent now of 3 young boys, nowhere near, that age, but that I will always remember what you just said, because it does, in that exact way it was said, will make it flip a lever in their mind, or trigger something in their mind that will say, oh my gosh. Yeah. Like he was always asking about why is this? But then it's like, okay, yeah, they're yours. And then, they're left holding the bag basically, emotionally, of what do they do next?
So with that lesson, do you find that you take that lesson into your conversations with employees? Because I could see you using that as like, hey, flip that switch to someone that is maybe, they have a little bit of aspirations to be an owner, to come into that ownership, and they're just maybe not performing. Do you use that lesson? Because that's key.
Yeah. I mean, I probably have used it a little bit more with my kids.
Yeah.
And the reason being is because I think, with employees, you don't have the same level, or at least I don't have the same level of wanting to control what's going on. And I think with my kids, I early on, I definitely did. And I had a vision for what I wanted from them. And then I started to mature and realize, as my kids became adolescents and teenagers, that, the more I pushed, the more I wasn't pulling them towards what I wanted. I was probably pushing away from it. And so, I've kind of taken the same approach with them, and just said, look, your mom and I are here for you. We're going to give you every opportunity to succeed. We want you to acknowledge and appreciate that you're given this opportunity. But what you do with it, that's on you. We'll help as much or as little as you want. We'll be involved as little or as much. But at the end of the day, you get to a certain point where you got to want to do it. And I think so. I think I've taken that more to my kids than I have my employees.
I like it.
So you answered really my next question and everything you've said. I mean, there's so many sound bites in this, Brian, that there's a small entrepreneur group that I'm a part of, that a few of the guys listen to it, a few of the guys I've had on the podcast, but this is fantastic. You gave so much great context to so many people that already listen to the show. But if you want to add anything extra as far as what people, I know you mentioned Rudy, your father, but what people or technology or maybe other experiences you didn't already allude to have really impacted the person you were, in your early 20s or that junior year to where you are today?
Yeah, I mean, so I think it's interesting that I remember being one thing about being really young is that you view the world through such a narrow lens, right? And so, in your own way, you think that you've had this, you know, you don't really appreciate how much life you have to experience, that what's in front of you, So I think one bit of advice that I got pretty early on from a guy that I viewed as being very successful. I sat down and was kind of struggling with, what did I want to do in my career? And, he gave me the advice to just go try things. And he told me something that sticks with me to this day, which is learn in your 20s and 30s, and you'll earn the rest of your life. And, I look at that in a way of, when I was 22 or 23, we all have those friends that had the hot sales job or something, and they're driving the fancy car. And, there's a reason people call it building a career, because that's what it really is. You have to put in the time, and you can make good money. I make good money as a professional in my 20s and 30s. But if you really are drawn to entrepreneurship and business ownership, you have to think about what you're doing early in your career. That's kind of, and similar to what your podcast, talks about, the root system, right? And you got to really be convinced that you're developing a skill set that's putting you on that track to really pick up that momentum after, let's say, you're 10 or 15 of your career. That's where things really start to really blossom. So I think early on, that mindset that I was given, I think really helped me. And then the other person, I'll just use him by name. His name's Jim Castellano. He is the retired chairman of Reuben Brown. And I mean, he took that firm from one office and 75 people to multiple offices and multiple locations, and now it's the biggest. He's overcome all of the national firms in the St. Louis area to be the biggest firm in St. Louis. And when I was leaving Reuben Brown, he sat down with me, and all he did was compliment Rudy and talked about how good of a decision he thought I was making. And it was completely, I've never had more respect for somebody to that point in my career than that moment, because he could have said a number of things, to scare me out of doing it, or he could have offered me a bigger raise, or he could have done a number of things that I would have probably, I think I had already made up my mind. But the fact that he did that, number one, made me a customer and a client of Reuben Brown for life. And number two, he's now on our board of directors. And I consider him one of my mentors as well. And, I talk to him, a couple times a week. And so I think the lesson I took away from that is life and careers are really long. And, in those pivotal moments, maybe when you're disappointed because an employee is making a decision to leave, or, a customer is deciding to leave, having the right attitude towards that can really pay dividends long term. And we've seen it at Raceline where people have left, and we've told them, there's a phenomenon called the Raceline boomerang. You might leave, but there's a good chance that we're going to see you come back.
Yeah.
And we've experienced it. And I think that the way Jim handled that, I would just say at the time, modeled professionalism to me. And to this day is something that, I view him as such a mentor and such a professional person in the St. Louis business community and beyond. He's just so well respected. And I think it's because of the way he handles himself and treats others.
And man, you can definitely tell that there's definitely those experiences that help mold where you've gotten to. Last question, and because I don't want to take any more of your time and I got going on, but if you were to give somebody in their early 20s, so maybe it's some of the interns that you talk to, or some of the newer people that join the company, what are 1, 2, or 3 pieces of advice that you would give them to either be successful with your team, your organization, or just successful in general?
Well, probably 2 things stand out to me from my own experience. Number 1 is I invested a lot of time in myself trying to figure out as much what I didn't want to do as what I did want to do. And, when I was a junior in high school, I'll never forget, I put on a suit. I worked selling suits actually, before, in like junior and senior year, I sold suits. And man, I loved it. I loved, it was commission based, and I just ate it up. But I put on a suit and I drove into Clayton and parked at Merrill Lynch. And at the time, I thought I wanted to go to school and be a stockbroker. Now a financial planner, I guess you'd say. And I walk in and go to the front desk and I just say, I'm here to volunteer. And the lady looked at me, and, I was 16 years old, 17 years old. I probably weighed 135 pounds soaking. My tie and shirt were probably 3 sizes too big. And she said, well, what do you mean? And I said, well, I just want to have permission to be here this summer to learn what these guys are doing. And next thing you know, I was interning for, and it was unpaid, but for the managing partner, and he gave me his Rolodex and he told me, he goes, hey man, if you want to help, here you go. And I started with the A's, and I would call, and he said, I want you to do 2 things. I want you, 1, to call each of these people and verify that this is still their correct information. And number 2, I wanted to see, how many appointments you can make for me. So I did it for the entire summer. I got to see what everybody was doing. And at the end of the day, prior to even going to college, I realized that, yeah, it was a good experience, but it wasn't what I wanted to do for my entire career. And I won't go into the reasons why, but basically I got to see what they did every day. And I got to see more than, what you would pick up on a movie or your neighbor or your uncle that you think is cool. Go actually, internships are extremely, they're extremely competitive now, right? But there aren't too many people that turn away volunteers. So, I looked at it as an investment in myself. And I would tell people that are, a younger version of me, that's something that I really think set me on the right track. I did it, same thing in college. I got paid for it, but I worked 4 years at a law firm. They offered to send me to Mizzou. And I actually had the job offer with Reuben Brown. And you know what? I just decided after 4 years of a law firm and watching what those guys did, just wasn't going to be, that wasn't the career for me. I thought I wanted to be an attorney when I went to college. So those are experiences, if you can get those, and don't limit yourself to something where you have to be paid, even just offer to volunteer. I think that's one thing that I would recommend to younger people. I see it with my own kids really struggling to pick a major, and then they pick a major and I ask them why. And, most young people, they have no clue that, they tell you, I don't know what I want to do. Well, there's no way for me to tell you what you want to do. You got to go out and have a little bit of experience and just throw yourself into the deep end, man. If I can walk into Merrill Lynch in a suit and volunteer, I think, just about anyone can do the same. So I would say that's one of the things. And then once you pick the career and you're in your career, I think the other thing that I'm seeing more and more that's a little disheartening is, a lot of people, I've had more than one person ask me, how do they get my job? And that's a pretty long story. And so I think the advice that I give most people is, if you want the promotion or you want the next job, I grew up in an era where you started doing that work. and promotion comes from recognition, and recognition comes from results. So if you want something, reach up. If somebody wants a bigger role in for Sella, maybe they've got to do something beyond what the job is. They've got to stay a little bit late to offer to help you with a proposal, Tony, or to, maybe they just come in and ask you if there's anything they can help, and that willingness to reach up and beyond, and not wait to get promoted, but really work to get recognized. I think that's what served me well. I mean, I don't know how else an accountant, goes from being the accounting manager of a engineering and construction company to being the president and COO if you don't say that you're willing to do other things, right? Don't be confined by what your education is or what your stereotype is. Just set your goals and work. And then if you're not being recognized, then that's when you really have to reflect on, are you working in the right place? And that's why so many people are drawn to entrepreneurship, is because, you control your own destiny, right? I mean, that's why I think the ESOP mentality works for our company, because it's an ownership mentality. That's what draws people to it. So if you're in a job where you're making the effort and you're getting the results and you're not getting the recognition, that's when you need to reevaluate where you're at.
I mean, this is going to be like a 2-week promo of all the little nuggets that we can pull out of this. I mean, I think it's huge. I think you just saying, doing things and learning that that's not what you want to do is huge, because even for people in their mid 30s that, or coming out of COVID and going, okay, now I have to make a complete career change or whatever, they could sit back and go, woe is me, I have to start over at 36 or 38. Or they could go from 22 to 38. I learned what not to do. I got a lot of experience. I learned, different companies, different ways. And now at 38, I know what to do.
Absolutely. And they may not realize it, but they're not really that far behind the curve. Right. There's a lot of earning to do between 38 and the end. So.
So I had the privilege of working with Sam Fox.
Yeah.
And, amazing guy. And I asked him the same question. What 1, 2, 3 pieces of advice would you give somebody my age? And he, without missing a beat, he leaned on the table. He says, "People, you hear me? People. It's people. Why do you think they go through 7 layers of vetting before they even get to me?" It was. Yeah, but when he talks about people, it's the same thing you're saying, though, is they've got to have the mental capacity to look at a situation, bad or good, and understand where it came from, looking back. So I had these experiences, they're bad, they're good, this is what I want to do, this is what I don't want to do, but then tying it in with similar to the ethos that you have is, staying hungry. That is huge. It's a big part of it. It's not all of it, but staying hungry, and just the fact that they're trying to take in information and grow themselves. Going back to the tree standpoint, if you're not growing, you're dying. Whether it's a company, whether it's an individual, whether it's a team, it doesn't matter. And it's up to each person that if it's an offshoot of that route, you've got to be putting into your mind, whether it's an experience or something you're reading or the people and mentors you have around you, it all matters.
Absolutely.
I don't want to take any more time. We're hitting 4:00, and I really appreciate you doing this with us. Of everybody we've interviewed so far, I can definitely say that there's so many. Jessica's going to be spinning her wheels trying to figure out which sound bites to use on this thing. So Brian, I really appreciate you, and I really appreciate your time, and I really appreciate you with your sharing yourself with us.
Yeah, appreciate you guys and what you're doing. I think it's a great thing. Young people need some direction. And I think it's part of our job to kind of pay that forward. So thanks for giving me the opportunity, and best of luck.
All right, Bob. Talk to you, man. Bye.
All the best. Thanks.
Ladies and gentlemen, that was our conversation with Brian Sneed of Raceline and Associates. We hope that you took as much out of that conversation as Jessica and I did. We looked at each other at the end of that conversation with eyes wide open, like, oh my gosh, this was one of the most powerful episodes that we think we recorded when it comes to business and entrepreneurship. And the experience that Brian shared with their journey from zero to, again, crushing 500 million this year, what they're projected to do, that doesn't just come overnight, doesn't just come from a hope of women and prayer. There is a lot at the core of that, and their experience with how they develop a culture and with their ethos and their baseline first, really feel that there was a lot here to take away from. So if you feel the same way, we ask that you give it a share, subscribe to the podcast. And if you guys are so inclined, you can reach Jessica and myself on Instagram. Feel free to DM us if you have any questions about any of the guests that we interviewed or anything else that we're doing with the podcast. You can follow me, Tony.Frisella, and Jessica is Jessica_L_writer on Instagram as well. So thank you. Stay tuned. We've got some great episodes that are recorded. We're currently editing, and we'll be dropping every Thursday morning at 5 a.m. So thank you, and hope to talk to you soon.